Garmin. I mean, they're the undisputed king of fitness wearables, but for years they've had this massive gap in their kingdom. Nutrition tracking.
A huge one.
Yeah, if you wanted to know if your pre-run fueling was good enough or, if that post-workout meal actually helped, you had to jump out of the Garmin app and log it somewhere else.
Well, that finally changed. The long-awaited food and nutrition logging feature is now in Garmin Connect.
And this feels like a monumental move.
Oh, it is. Garmin is basically trying to fill that final major piece of the wellness puzzle. They want to give you a truly holistic view by tracking calories and macros, protein, fats, carbs, right next to all the data they already have on your calorie burn and activity.
Putting consumption and expenditure side by side.
Exactly.
But there's a catch, and we have to get this out of the way right now because it really frames this whole deep dive.
The price tag.
The price tag. This is not a free update. It is exclusively a feature of the paid Garmin Connect Plus platform, which is going to run you about $69 a year.
And that annual fee is really the core of our mission today. We are unpacking multiple sources, the official announcement, an exhaustive review by DC Rainmaker, and a really critical real-world test from the 5K runner. All to figure out if this new feature is actually good enough to justify paying that subscription.
Because what Garmin is asking you to do is drop whatever you're using now, which is probably MyFitnessPal or MFP, and pay them instead.
Right, and while that old MFP integration, it technically still works if you were, grandfathered into an older free version with barcode scanning.
Which was the key feature.
It was. But for any new user today, if you want that scanning in MFP, you need their premium tier, and that's about $80 a year.
So on paper at least, Garmin's price looks competitive.
It does. Now we just had to figure out if the product actually delivers on the promise.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with the vision.
Yeah.
What is Garmin promising here, and how are they trying to solve that logging friction that makes so many people just quit after a week?
The official line, right from their press release, is all about this idea of a single source of truth. They want to tie your calorie, your protein, fat, and carb intake directly to your runs, your rides, your workouts.
All in one app.
All in one app. It's supposed to be a seamless feedback loop.
And the tech they're using to do this is, I have to say, it sounds pretty impressive. It's way more than just typing in Apple.
Oh, absolutely. They've got 3 main ways to log food, all aimed at speed and convenience. First, you have the standard search function, global food database, packaged goods, restaurant items, all the usual suspects.
Then you have the barcode scanner, which is, I'd argue, the most important feature for any modern logging app.
And both Chase the Sun and DC Rainmaker were impressed with it. They described it as super fast. You just point the camera at the barcode, and boom, it's logged in like less than a second.
That speed is everything.
It is. And then the third way is, it's the futuristic sounding one. The AI-powered camera recognition.
This is where you just take a picture of your plate.
Exactly. A bowl of chili, a plate of leftovers, and the AI tries to figure out what you're eating and the portion sizes. DC Rainmaker even tested it by taking a random photo of an entire grocery store shelf and said he was crazy impressed with how much it recognized.
Okay, I have to stop you there. Because that sounds like a fantastic marketing demo, but doesn't that feel like a misallocation of resources?
What do you mean?
Well, if the AI can recognize a shelf of obscure European snacks, but most people just want to log a simple piece of toast, have they prioritized the right thing? That kind of object recognition feels a little like flashover function.
That is a very fair point, and we're going to see exactly how that AI handles the basics when we get to the real-world tests.
Yeah, okay.
But on the intelligence side, Garmin is also promising personalization. It sets nutrition targets for you based on your existing stats, your activity level, your average active calories, all the stuff it already knows.
And they have what they call active intelligence insights. I find this part pretty compelling.
It's where the ecosystem really could shine.
Yeah, it might see a pattern like linking your low-quality sleep to late-night snacking, and then prompts you to maybe change that habit. It's making connections a standalone app just couldn't.
And the setup is pretty streamlined since Garmin already has your weight and activity data, but, and this is a huge but, we have to flag one crucial detail about switching over.
What's that?
If you enable the new Garmin Nutrition feature, it immediately and permanently disconnects any existing MyFitnessPal integration you have running.
Wow, okay. That's a really big deal, especially for longtime users.
It is. For years, people have been using MFP as a sort of backdoor to get data from non-Garmin devices like a Whitting scale or other third-party sensors into the Garmin ecosystem.
So if you switch to Garmin's native food logging, that backdoor slams shut.
Completely. That old connection gets severed. Garmin wants everything running through their system now, and if you relied on those workarounds, you might be breaking a critical data link just to try the new food logging.
It's a choice you have to make. New feature versus old data flow. So let's say you make the switch. How smooth is the actual daily logging? Because for $69, it better be fast. That friction has to be close to zero.
It has to be frictionless or you just won't do it. Chase the Sun noted that once you find the nutrition section, which you can add as an at-a-glance widget on the home screen, the process itself is pretty intuitive.
I think the biggest advantage is probably the repeat entries.
For sure. You can create My Foods for manual stuff you eat all the time and My Meals, which are collections of foods. And crucially, you can log something with an exact timestamp down to the minute.
That time stamping is vital for athletes. You can actually see how that banana you ate 45 minutes before a run might have impacted your performance or your body battery.
It connects fueling to your physiology.
But here's the real unique selling point, I think. This is something no competitor can easily match: the deep integration with the watch.
Oh, absolutely. This is what sets Garmin apart from every standalone app. On compatible watches, the Fenix or Forerunner series, you can see the nutrition widget right on your wrist.
Calories remaining, macro percentages, all at a glance.
And more importantly, you can log your recent or favorite foods right from the watch. Even if you're offline, it'll just sync later.
That is massive. You finish a long ride, you're exhausted, and you just want to log that recovery drink without fumbling for your phone.
And on the newer watches with voice control, you can just say log food to launch it. That kind of instant access when you're sweaty and tired, that's a huge factor in whether you'll actually stick with it.
Okay, that all sounds very promising, but DC Rainmaker, who travels all the time, he found a huge travel caveat. It sounds like an absolute nightmare if you're not ready for it.
Yeah, this is the localization issue, and it's a critical flaw right now. If you travel outside of the home country in your Garmin account, say you live in the US, but you're in France for a month,
Right?
you have to manually go into the app settings and change the scanning country every single time you want to scan a barcode.
And if you forget to do that,
DC Rainmaker confirmed. Absolutely nothing will scan. The app defaults to searching only your home region's database. So you could be in a Paris supermarket, try to scan a box of cereal, and the app will just shrug at you until you dig 5 menus deep to change that setting.
that is a huge roadblock to usability.
Massive.
Okay, and that brings us perfectly into the segment where the rubber really hits the road. We've talked about the impressive tech, the promise of speed. Now let's get into the real-world drawbacks. Specifically, the rigorous test from the 5K runner. They called the feature unusable and said it failed at the first hurdle. I mean, that is a brutal assessment.
It is brutal because they tested it where it counts most on simple everyday tasks. They detailed what they called the 100-tap breakfast.
100 taps. What was in this breakfast?
Just a medium latte and 4 slices of thick Hovis granary toast, a standard UK breakfast.
Let's break down that failure because it just sounds absurd.
So the AI failed dramatically. It recognized the general idea of toast, but it only counted 1 slice, not the 4 they actually had. Okay.
And worse, it completely missed the butter and the coffee itself. The user had to manually log 75% of a very simple meal. But wait a second. We just heard the AI was crazy impressed and could identify a whole grocery shelf.
Yeah.
How does a company that builds that kind of tech choke on 4 slices of toast?
It points to a huge fundamental disconnect between the flashy demo features and what people actually need day to day.
It really does. And the manual corrections sound like a pain.
They were extensive. The 5K runner had to delete the first entry, search for a similar bread because their specific UK brand wasn't in the database, manually adjust the serving size, and then settle for a reduced fat latte because the standard one wasn't listed.
So logging a simple breakfast became this incredibly tedious task.
Dozens of steps. And the pain just continues if you cook at home. There's the recipe problem, which is a confirmed limitation that makes logging home-cooked meals agonizing.
What's the issue there?
DC Rainmaker confirmed it. There's currently no way to input a full recipe, List all your ingredients and quantities, and then have the app automatically divide the calories and macros into defined serving sizes.
So if I make a big batch of chili that I know serves 6 people, I can't just log one serving of chili and have the app do the math.
No. You can create a My Meal, which is just a collection of foods, but if you eat a quarter of that chili, you have to manually calculate the breakdown for that quarter yourself, which kind of defeats the whole purpose.
For anyone serious about macros, that limitation alone is a deal
A
breaker.
massive one.
And going back to the barcodes, the 5K runners test in the UK showed a critical localization failure. Even with the UK region set correctly, they had zero success scanning 10 common UK supermarket barcodes.
Zero. That really speaks to the quality of the database outside of what is clearly their primary focus region, which is probably North America. It's just sparse and incomplete in other key markets.
And even when they tried to scan something really generic, like a piece of fruit,
Hmm.
a 50-gram Satsuma, it just highlighted all these little points of friction.
Right. The app defaulted to imperial units, measuring it in inches, even though the user's settings were metric. And more critically, the smallest serving size option it offered was 100 grams.
So you're forced to overestimate the calories for your 50-gram piece of fruit.
Significantly. And it's all those little details that add up to massive user frustration and, frankly, inaccurate tracking.
And finally, what about that amazing AI image recognition when they tested it on a complex sandwich?
It correctly identified only 2 out of 5 ingredients, just 40% accuracy. The 5K runner noted it hugely overestimated the salmon by 300% and completely missed things like carrots.
So the performance was, what, mid-tier?
Mid to lower tier compared to other AIs in the test, like Gemini, which hit 80% accuracy. It just reinforces your earlier point. The AI is flashy, but the core database and the basic recognition need a ton of work to make that $69 feel worthwhile.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, who might be considering that subscription? We know it's a bit cheaper than NFP Premium, but
Yeah.
is it actually worth switching if you've already got a system that works?
Well, from a pure price comparison, Connect Plus is competitive if you're a brand new user who needs scanning. But dedicated apps are often cheaper and better. Users of Chronometer, which is about $40 a year, or MacroFactor, they're all extremely hesitant to switch.
And that hesitation is because of all the crucial missing features, right? The things that super users really rely on.
Absolutely. The biggest hurdle, flagged by pretty much everyone, is that there is no import feature at all.
None.
None. You cannot import your historical data, your saved meals, your custom recipes from MyFitnessPal or anywhere else. If you have years of logging history, which is the most valuable data you have for seeing trends, it's just gone when you switch.
For someone serious about their long-term health, that alone is a deal breaker.
It really is.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there are other functional limits. For example, you can't share your food log with an external nutritionist or a coach, which is a pretty standard feature in MFP.
And what about for athletes?
Critically for active users, there are no training-aware macro targets. The app won't automatically adjust your carb or calorie goals on a day you have a long run scheduled. You have to manually override the targets every time, which again just adds friction.
And we also heard that the calorie data isn't syncing out to platforms like Training Peaks, which is a major drawback for any coached athlete.
Right. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, this whole feature touches directly on Garmin's long-standing data policy, their famous walled garden approach. Garmin wants to offer this holistic view of health, which is great, but they still restrict a lot of external data from coming into their ecosystem.
That's the real irony, isn't it? They've built this new holistic feature. But if you happen to use an Apple Watch for a day, or your scale only syncs through some other app, that non-Garmin activity is basically ignored by their big picture metrics, like training status or body battery.
Yeah, a longtime commenter on DC Rainmaker's review, Mark Simkin, he made a great point about this. He said, Garmin's goal of a holistic view is fundamentally undermined when they block non-Garmin activities from coming in. You can't be truly holistic if you're blocking half the data at the door.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive. I think the core finding is pretty clear. Garmin nutrition tracking is a really compelling idea, especially for someone new to logging who just wants everything native to their Garmin watch.
For that person, the SPEDI entry, the risk logging, the price, it could make sense.
But the trade-offs are significant. The current version feels too flawed, too incomplete for serious macro trackers, especially if you rely on recipes, value your historical data, or if you live outside the US where the database is clearly not ready.
The tests from the 5K runner showed that pretty definitively. It feels like a solid version 1.0 release, but it needs a lot of refinement to justify that yearly fee for anyone who isn't a total beginner.
That being said, all the sources seem to suggest that this is a legitimate, meaningful feature. It's not just some gimmick that's going to disappear in 6 months.
Absolutely not. And that brings us to the final thought for you to mull over. If, and it's a big if, but if Garmin really commits to the tedious work of fixing its database, improving localization, building out recipes, and sharing features, and if they do all that, will this feature eventually become the industry standard for active people?
And if it does, what happens then?
Does it finally force the dedicated nutrition apps to open up their systems and integrate properly with Garmin instead of the other way around? Could this fundamentally shift the entire power dynamic in the health tracking space?